Namaskaram, welcome to P Guru's channel. It is my pleasure to have Professor R. Vaidyanathan to share his thoughts on Sanatanis. Why are we diffident and defensive? Professor, before we start today's talk, I would just like to request our viewers, we are about 103,000 now, getting close to that, and we need to go a little bit faster. So, have you told your friend or family about P Guru's channel? I hope you are watching our 6:30 p.m. IST daily hangouts, 15 minutes crisp news all around the world, what is happening. For example, tomorrow or today at 6:30 p.m. your time, you will be able to hear what exactly went wrong with the stimulus bill that the Congress and Senate have passed, that President Trump is saying he's going to veto it. Well, what nobody did, which but only P Gurus has done, is to create a pie chart of how this 900 billion is going to be spent. In fact, I have tweeted it out. You look at the tweet, you'll understand where things are coming from, where Trump is not happy about. So to know more about it, please do join in at 6:30 live.
So you mentioned about the topic, why are we diffident and defensive? That we part we will see as we go along. The we is actually those who follow what is known as Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism. Or in many places I find, not everyone, of course there are exceptions, but by and large they are very defensive and diffident. And they always say, no sir, it is not like that. And wherever, globally I have seen in US and other places also, where they are living for a long period of time, and somebody pounces on him, and every second fellow is getting killed in India, every lady is getting raped, and you have this caste system, and all these people immediately, no, they try to explain, or they try to give some excuses, and actually they look very very sad and awkward. Actually, they have this sense of that we are not right type of thing. I am very puzzled about it actually, because of the following 5 reasons. We don't have to be diffident or defensive at all on any matter. First and foremost, we should get it inscribed in our brain, or here, we should put on. I have got, of course, my vibhuti. Otherwise,
Yes.
we have to engrave it. We are the only civilization, Hindu civilization, which never had slavery. Most important point, which many people don't even, some of these are very obvious, but at the appropriate time they forget about it. Actually, slavery was originally that of Islam, and then from there it went into this Europe and US, and the US went and got huge number of people as slaves actually. And everybody knows the history. Even today they are talking about blacks lives don't matter and other thing. And so that's not so we never had slavery as a system in the known history of Hindus. That's the first most important thing to remember. The British had taken away many people from India to sugarcane fields in Fiji, Mauritius, and other places, and even to places in the Caribbean islands, and they were all called endangered laborers. Endangered in terms of having certain amount of contract under which they are committed to be laborers. They were not owned by individual British persons, unlike in US, where the slaves were owned by individual. Here they were not owned; they were all working for the company, primarily in the sugarcane activity, because they required huge amount of labor, and that was the time in which sugar got introduced into the food system and other thing. The single largest crime committed by the whites, if you ask me, by introducing sugar into, and the same fellows are now telling don't use sugar, and that's a separate history. So we never had slavery. I think we should be extremely proud. We should sit on top of many a mountain and shout. The only civilization which never had any idea of slavery. First point. Second point is, we also did not invade any country. Hindus never went on as an army, went to, the other parts of the world or even neighboring countries to conquer another. Primarily, we did trade, and we spread lot of our culture and art, music, dance, and other things. There is one famous quote by one of the U.S. ambassador, this to Chinese ambassador to U.S. He seems to have told as early as 1940s in one of the commencement address in U.S. that India is one country which conquered China without firing a single bullet. And we had a large amount of our treasures taken away, and they sent ministers through the sea coast, and who came into India, who took a lot of our manuscripts, our ideas of medicine, our ideas of yoga, our ideas of dance, drama, and other things. So we did conquer, but we didn't conquer in terms of what is understood in the Western. They call it civilization, but we can't agree in the context of Western attitude of conquering world by violence. We didn't do that. For instance, there is a very interesting thing. I was in Taiwan, and in Taipei they have a museum in the uphill. Actually, you have to go up the hill, and that museum had huge amount of Sanskrit literature, artifacts, and various types of handwritten, even some of them work and other thing. And later on, when I inquired, I found out that when Chiang Kai-shek left China, after the Mao Zedong took over another, he had something like 14 ships, out of which 11 to 12 ships had only Indian material. He thought that they are the ones which is most required, brought it here and kept it in the museum. And that is the way in which we have influenced the world, including our Cholas. They went primarily for trade, commerce, and spread a lot of what one can call the again art, literature, and other thing. And you may also know, most people will know, one of the largest temples in Cambodia, in Angkor Wat, was built through the efforts of kings from India. So they were not, unlike other cult from desert areas, they were not destroying actually any existing temples or worshipping places, but they were building actually. So the second thing is, we never invaded. And third thing is, we never tried to convert others into our system by using what you may loosely call belt bombs. That was never our culture actually. We had debate, discussion, and for instance, even the old discussion, the biggest debate in India between Mandan Mishra and Adi Shankara was conducted in an atmosphere which was very peaceful, and never they tried to take swords and then finish off each other. And whoever won, his ideology won or anything like that. Nothing. We never tried to. In southern part of India, very interesting, for the last 300 years nearly, there is a big fight between two segments of Vaishnavites actually regarding the method of attaining salvation. One is talking in terms of the cat method, which is another is talking in terms of the monkey method, which carries the kid in its side, and then cat lifts the thing and then takes it. And what is the relationship between man and God is explained in this fashion. The point is, for more than 250-300 years, this debate is going on, and never once any one of the groups tried to physically harm the other group or anything. It was always by debate, it was always by discussion, it was always establishing their point of view, and obviously, various times, various types of issues were brought out and other things. So we never believed in making others follow our system by violence. Today, for instance, you would be observing, I'm sure in US also there is these ISKCON groups everywhere. They are in Russia, they are in various other European countries. They go around sometime in public places, some 30-40 of them, chanting Hare Rama, Hare Krishna with all the dole and with all music, and in open roads actually. In London, I'm sure in US also, many places they may be doing it.
We
right?
used to have it, sir. It has kind of died down lately. There is ISKCON, but ISKCON is more into cow culture, and other things nowadays. You don't see them as much as you used to. I remember as a student, I used to run into a lot of them, especially at the airport. Yeah,
Anyhow, there could be, in terms of, the number of new people and so many things. But the
right,
point
right,
I want to stress is not even a single person will claim that they were asked to do this under, violence or under any threat, or it's a voluntary on their own actually. What I want to stress is we never ever believed in terms of making others accept our way of thinking, our way of living using belt bomb. So these are the three fundamentals we should always recollect and remember. No slavery, no conquering of other countries, no coercion or threat for others to convert our way of thinking. The fourth one is our respect for nature. Phenomenally, we have had enormous amount of intrinsic relationship with animal world as well as with the uh, what you call vegetarian, or what you call this tree world,
yeah.
or the world of the nature. Over a long period of time, so many type of smriti, so many type of literature is explaining the nature of our relationship. For instance, we had this Vigneshwara, who is partly elephant. We had this Hanuman, who is actually monkey. They say monkey god, and they don't understand the significance of developing love for animals using some of these methods. Second is trees. One of my colleagues from US who came to India when we were traveling, in various places by car, he used to be amazed that many places women worship trees. He has seen on the roadside women coming with some lota of water or something, and camphor, and some kumkum. He says he has traveled in Latin America, he has traveled in Russia, China, Europe. Nowhere he has seen trees are being worshipped actually. We have one group, Bishnois in Rajasthan actually, who are very well known for their love for trees actually. They used to hug trees, and there was a history telling that how some 700 or some of them were killed actually by the invading people, but they did not give up their love for trees. Anyhow, on an average, we are extraordinarily nature lovers. It's not required for that Norwegian girl to come and tell us that, listen to me, that nature is important and everything. And not definitely the white man, because for 200 years they raped the nature actually. I always used to say that wash their bottom. They have destroyed so many forests left and right. Nobody seemed to talk about it. They could have washed their bottom with water. There is absolutely no difficulty about it. But they created this system, and then they destroyed huge amount of forest. Second is they also made, for instance, water. They made it into a huge business in terms of selling it in bottles. And when I was in, I remember late 70s, my professor at Urbana used to say, you can take this tap water, nothing wrong about it actually. And almost all the municipalities are reasonably treating the water and supplying it to the public. But slowly what has happened, they made this water as a business actually. The point is, so second is there are established literature which says that this steak, or what you call this beef cow industry is one of the largest contributor to the ecosystem's damage. In terms, there are a lot of studies on that, and how the entire ecosystem is damaged more because of the beef industry compared to other type of chicken and other things. But they have not. It's one of the largest, thing which are consumed. When we say cow is to be treated with respect and love, they were aghast about it. So the nature, love is something intrinsic to our culture actually, intrinsic to our what one can call heritage, about which we can really be very, very proud about it. You wanted to say something?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. The water that comes to your tap in your house in the United States, by law, it is sampled for any kind of traces 15 times a day.
See, that is the level, and so it can be used for our
Yes,
purposes.
it is much more purer than the water that you will buy from a store in a plastic can. And that plastic, if it sits in sunlight, for example, you have half drunk a plastic water from a plastic, a bottle, and then you put it in the car, you go and do something and come back. In that heat, the plastic can actually react with the water. So you are really looking at drinking something contaminated, and there is no guarantee that the water that got bottled was pure in the first place, because you look at it, they just tell you that you simple minerals here and there. It's really difficult to determine what is the quality process that it went through, and nobody seems to want to know about it, and they still feel that that is the purer form of water.
It's a huge business actually because of the
Yes.
nature of the business. It has captured the imagination, and people genuinely think drinking tap water is not very good. Another thing, as if we have to only drink. They have converted the whole society, U.S. society, Europe also, for this what one can call the business of water. Is something very very interesting. Second, the last point I would like to stress is, so we looked at slavery, we never had. We looked at no conquering of other countries. We looked at not killing people in order to make them accept our way of living or anything, only by debate and discussion. We also looked at our love for nature, love for animals, and last most important point is our respect for women. Throughout the history, if you go back in time, there were several type of rishis who were women actually. There were several philosophers who are coming out. As I earlier mentioned, the debate between Adi Shankara and Mandan Mishra, you know who was the judge? The judge was the wife of Mandan Mishra, not any other third person or something. It was agreed by both the parties, more so by Adi Shankara, that he would respect whatever the verdict is given, supposedly quote unquote a biased person, because she is the spouse of Mandan Mishra. But finally, actually, she told that Adi Shankara is the one who won the debate, and then Mandan Mishra became one of his earliest disciples. What I want to stress is, women have all through, all our rivers are named after women. People just, these elementary facts people forget actually. We, every day morning, we chant Gange cha Yamune Chaiva, like up to Kaveri. All the seven rivers are named after women only. It's not very, and then all our three primary gods for giving us education, giving us wealth, and giving us power. All of them are women gods, actually. It's Saraswati who gives you education, Lakshmi gives you money or wealth, and Durga or
Durga.
Parvati gives you power. So this is when you, the male gods, basically I should lightheartedly put it, male god can't give you anything. What does Vishnu gives you? You go to his temple, some Tulsi Tirtha will be given to you. At worst, in a Margadi month, you will get some pongal or something made. That's all. Nothing more, no more. Or you can directly ask him for salvation. That's okay. And Shiva, it's much worse actually. They give you only a sacred ash, which you have put on. They don't even make pongal on this different months or anything. Shiva is one of those, that way, very, very, what one can call a confused god. Nothing, of course, he himself doesn't have anything. He is in charge of Masan, and category wise, maybe he can be treated as a scheduled tribe actually. So that is and he doesn't even have an address. And the famous story about Parvati's father conducting a yagna, and then he was to invite, and then Parvati asked, "Why have you not?" He says he doesn't even have an address. How can I invite him? Where do I send my mail? It will bounce back only. He's an addressless fellow. Like that, he tells, and the story is very big. Now, point is, the women have always been, nowadays the modern time they talk about rights and other things. They are never worried about rights. They were always worried about respect. They were phenomenally respected. They were given an importance in society, actually, in terms of, and during the Mughal invasion, a lot of these changes took place. What are the changes? Changes like, occupying what one can call keeping women at home, which Mughals did because of the harem and other thing, burqa. So many things came about. Now, I want to stress what the white man has done to India is they have inculcated subtly and very, very successfully a sense of guilt and envy syndrome. They have made us all feel guilty. Oh, that you have done this, you have done that. Caste, for instance, oppressed. I have asked several historians, including Marxists, is there one single caste war in India between Kurmis and Kioris, Yadavs and Kurmis, or Devars? They could not tell. So, 1,000 years they say oppression. 1,000 years, you mean those oppressed people just kept quiet. That's a very unique species in the world, actually. It's not possible. You look at Europe. Every 100 years there was every 30 years there was a war between different groups in Europe. They always used to call it 100-year war, which is a bogus thing. Most of the time it was only 30, 40 years. And a war between different sects of Christianity, different sects of Islam, Islam and Christianity, it went on, and different type of kingdoms, which are all, we don't have so much amount of wars at all. And this is something very interesting. So, second point I would like to mention is envy. So, they have somehow made us feel that envious about the white man. That, this is the way in which we have to live. This is like you told about water, for instance. We are also now following the same bottled water type of a thing. We are envious about their atmosphere, and so far on a large scale we have not shifted to washing bottom with paper. As of now we still continue to use only the water. Otherwise we are made to feel envious about, oh, he is great, he is the, and to the extent that Gulab Jamun was renamed as Lady Canning in Bengal, because that the wife of Canning was so much loving it, we thought we will rename it as Lady Canning. So guilt and envy syndrome. Envy regarding their way of living, guilt regarding our way of doing thing, or what we have never committed. We are one civilization. Hindus were made to feel guilty about uncommitted errors. This is something very, very important to note. Uncommitted mistakes or uncommitted error or uncommitted. So this is success of them, I would rather say, and the weakness of us in terms of accepting this guilt and envy syndrome. Sooner we come out of this whole thing, not be defensive or diffident or anything. Whenever they talk about anything, we have to pounce back. We never had slavery. They have not even today come out of it in US. You know, the Black Lives Matter is actually a continuation of the age-old theory of slavery.
Right.
So we never had slavery. We never invaded anyone. If at all, we actually gave asylum to the people from, what one can call Iran. Now Parsis, they are called Persians. And we gave asylum to these people from Israel, actually, during the Second World War. Actually, they themselves say, Israelis, that their government has accepted. India is the only one country where Jews were never had any problem or any type of discrimination. Point is, we have to become, if you ask me, more offensive oriented, not diffident or defensive or anything, and tell them, to their face, to their eyes, if required, that we are much, much more civilized, much, much more advanced than what you think you are. And that's, I think, one thing which we should cultivate. That should be our New Year resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was a very great talk, and I think it's a very good resolution to have. We should not hang our heads in shame. Don't be diffident, don't be shy, don't be defensive. Know your religion, know what the Sanatana Dharma is. That is very important. But if you are watching P Gurus, by now you're probably armed, because we are a very big proponent of this, and we want to educate the world, and we want to in fact live the leadership the world so badly needs today, because there are so many people who are confused. and I think we are Sanatana Dharma can actually lead the way in that way. In fact, you will see over last 100 years, right? Some sadhu or sant or saint has come from India who has actually really been able to influence people's lives. Like today you have Jaggi Vasudev, you have Sri Ravi Shankar, you have people like that, and then you'll have another set coming through in the next few years. So thank you very much, Professor RV. That was a wonderful, wonderful conversation we had. Namaskaram, and we'll be back again with interesting talk. And if we don't see you, Professor RV, before the end of the year, wish you a very happy New Year and hope that
Thank you very much.
yeah,
Thanks a lot.
2021 will be kinder and gentler than this.
Right. Thank you.